all, this is Dana. In this video I'm going to be showing you some simple techniques for embroidery. So the first stitches I'm going to be teaching you are the straight stitch, back stitch, and running stitch. And I'm putting all three of these into the one tutorial because they're all very, very similar. The first thing you're going to obviously need are some needles. I've just got some basic embroidery needles here. The main thing with embroidery needles is you just want to make sure the eye is big enough for the amount of floss you're going to be using. If you're using a specialty floss, it's really chunky. Obviously, you're going to need a bigger eye, and that they're sharp enough to get through your fabric. Tapestry needles that you use for cross stitch are blunt, but yeah, embroidery needles need to be sharp. So totally up to you, personal preference. So the first thing I'm going to do is teach you a straight stitch, and this one where it's rotating around a circle is actually called a spoke stitch. So I've got a little knot in the end, so don't panic about that if you're coming from cross stitching where you're not really supposed to do knots. It's totally okay in embroidery just because a lot of the time your stitches are actually going to be three-dimensional. Like there's a lot of stitches that actually bubble up and create texture on the surface. The point between not having knots and cross stitches is that it can create lumps on the back of your fabric which show up in framing, because cross stitch tends to be quite flat unless you're doing beading, and also your needle might get caught on your knot. The chances of that happening with embroidery is less, so you can do whatever you like. You can do a loop method, and I'll put a video to that in the description below if you want to start using a loop method. You can do what's called a waist knot. There's a lot of different ways you can anchor your thread in embroidery. I just use a small little knot because it seems to work just fine. So there you go. So your straight stitch is literally a straight stitch. So you're just going up. And then for this one, you're going to want to come out the same hole again. Or if it's easier, you can go down. I think I might go down just because then I'm not going to stab through that knot. Sorry, I'm missing. It's really hard sometimes to actually see what you're doing with the camera. So in case you're ever wondering why occasionally my hands drift out of the screen, that would be why. Oh, and this pattern that I'm doing in the last video where I taught how to transfer your design to your fabric, this is actually using something called Fabris Sticky Solvy. It's sort of like a water-soluble stabilizer that's sticky, so you run it, you can get sheets that are photocopier printer size, and you run it through your photocopier, and then you literally just stick it onto your fabric, and then when you're done you just wash it away, which is super cool. So there you go. So that's your basic of your spoke stitch. So that's going to be going round and round and round like that. So this stitch, the spoke stitch, it's actually it is used in another stitch that I'll be covering in a, I think about next tutorial, I think, called a woven wheel, which is really, really cool. So this kind of stitch is the basis for that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to another color, and I'll show you another variation on the straight stitch, which is called the seed stitch. Alright, let's finish that off. Just drop the needle there. So seed stitch, which is what I've indicated here. So for any patterns like this, that sometimes the designers will tell you which stitch they think would be best for that particular pattern, if you want it to look like the sample does on the, say, the photograph of the listing or whatever, or of the pattern. Other times you can just kind of wing it. And that's the nice thing about embroidery, is like once your design is actually on your fabric, however you've transferred it, you can, if you decide you don't want to do this, you want to do, say, I don't know, a ton of French knots, that's totally fine. And that's the nice thing about it. It's kind of flexible. Like you get your basic outlines, but then it's flexible as to what you actually do with that. So this one I'm going to show you the loop method. Sorry, I'm just going to try to anchor this for a second. So sorry if it's out of... So because this is water soluble and these lines are actually going to disappear, I don't need to worry about going over them exactly. If you are doing something that's a more permanent method, then you will have to make sure that your stitching does cover your lines. So you can see, so this is a loop method, so you can see I've got a loop at the end of the thread here. I've actually just folded the thread in half, and you just put that loop through the needle and pull, and that actually anchors. your thread. If you want a more detailed description of that, I'll put that in the video description below. So yeah, so seed stitch is basically just a bunch of really short little straight stitches. So it's really cute and it provides some really nice texture. It can be, you can do it as dense or as loose as you want. Like you can, like, say you get this little free pattern, and this will be available to download for free on my site, this little pattern. You just go to the little pop-up link that's going to be showing up at the end of the video, or you can go to the video description and sign up for the Peacock Lounge, and that gives you access to all of these new embroidery patterns, as well as to a bunch of cross-stitch patterns that I have for free on my site. So sorry if I keep moving out of the camera, it's really hard seeing around the camera. So there you go. And if you're using like, this stuff obviously doesn't work because it makes the fabric a little stiffer, but if you want to do what's called a sewing method, which is when, I'll just come up, this one I'll show you. I do it a lot in this cross stitch. So it's when you would keep your hands on the top of your fabric and you'd go down. So you can kind of do it here, but you can see you have to bend the fabric quite a bit in the hoop, and it's a little bit trickier with, yeah, I can't quite do it. I can't quite bend the fabric enough with it being a hoop. But if you've got it in the hoop, yeah, I can kind of do it there. If you've got it in the hoop and you're not using this water-soluble stuff, you can actually just loosen the tension on the hoop a little bit and then do the sewing method. Just be very careful, because the whole point of the hoop is to keep the fabric taut so that you don't end up buckling your fabric as you're stitching. So you do have to be quite careful of your thread tension as you're doing that. All right, so that's a straight stitch there. I'll just drop that off at the back. And so we got straight stitch, straight stitch. Next one I'm going to show you is back stitch. Actually, I could have left that on, so I'll use the same color. So back stitch, it's very similar to if you do cross stitch, it's very similar, except that you're not, with cross stitch you're going into the holes that are already in the fabric. With this one, you're kind of determining yourself how big you want your stitches to be. All right, so I'm going to start here. Missed the line a little bit. Oh well. Yeah, so if you make a mistake, like you can see I've just sort of barely missed the line, I'm going to leave it for now. But what you would do in this case is you would actually just pull a needle off of your thread and then go to the back and then just rethread your needle. That's why it's good to not thread your needle so that the thread is going one direction and then you knot it, so then your needle is anchored to your thread, because then you can't take the needle off. So when I'm stitching, I've actually had a lot of people ask, when I'm stitching I actually just kind of hang on to the tail like this, and that way you're not pulling your needle off your thread every time you pull the thread through. I'm kind of gripping it like that. That prevents your needle from sliding off, so I'm just going to leave it for now. You can go forward. And what you can do with backstitch as well, so you're going forward and then you're going to go back and then you're just going to keep going back. Thus the name backstitch. What you can do, depending on the curvature of what you're traveling along, like say your line is like really, really curved, you're going to want to shorten your backstitch. It's the same with any of these sort of outline stitches. The more curved your line is, like say you're going around a sharp bend, you're going to want to shorten your stitch a bit. So I'm just going to pull it in closer so you can see. So you can see I'm going right up against the previous stitch. So you're not piercing through it, you're going right up against it. So I'll do one more. So this is a really nice stitch to do because it's quite simple looking, but if you get nice even rhythm of the stitches going around, it actually looks really, really, really pretty, and it's great for outlining. So for this one, I'll be doing back stitch for around each of these flowers, and then for the leaves as well, and then straight stitch for the center of the leaves here. And the next one I'm going to show you is the running stitch. which is these ones here and these ones here. Again, like I said with this one, because this is going to be washed away, you don't have to follow these lines exactly. You can do whatever length of stitch you want. If you want your running stitch to be longer and have longer gaps, that's totally fine. Just be aware of when you're transferring your design, if it's using a permanent method like the iron-on pen that I show in the last video, that you're aware that you are going to have to follow those lines if that's how you mark your fabric up. So what I'm going to do here is going to go down here. So if your fabric's a little bit looser in your hoop, like I said, then the running stitches are a lot easier because you can just kind of go in and out and in and out and in and out of your fabric and then pull your needle through once and get a whole bunch of stitches at once. Because this is a little bit more, I'm just going to make bigger stitches so you can see. Actually, no, I'll do that. Because this is stiffer because of the Fabrisolve on it, then it's trickier to do that. And the Fabrisolve does make it slightly harder to get your needle through, not by a lot. Like it's pretty easy to do, but it does just give it that little bit of extra tension because you are going through an extra layer of fabric. Alright, so that's running stitch. So running stitch, like I said, you can do long stretches of the stitch and then tiny little gap in between, or you can do tiny little stitch and then a long gap in between. It's totally up to you, and you can vary it. Like I said, if you're going around a sharp bend, then you're going to probably want to narrow up the gaps and narrow up the stitches a little bit. If you're going big longer stretches, you could, like for these, you could do quite long stretches and then some tighter ones around here, which would give it a really neat sort of flow of the texture of the stitches. So it's really, really up to you what you do. So that's pretty much it for now. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Like I said, this will be available as a freebie in my shop so you can practice these stitches. I'd love to see what colors you use for these. For this one, I'm using 3808 for the green. I'm going to do a blue up here, which is 3842. This is all DMC, and the pink is 718. And the red is 816. So you can do whatever colors you like. That's just the colors I just happen to grab. And of course you can add in extra spokes if you want it to look really, really cool. And I can't wait to see what you do. Feel free to post them on the Peacock and Fig Facebook page, your progress and whatnot. And I hope to talk to you later. Bye for now.